Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, I wanted to go over some things that you ought to be doing if you want to start climbing some rating in Arena. And no, I don't mean just pressing your buttons really good. This is something a little bit more subtle and maybe not as obvious, but it is shot calling. The ability to tell your teammates what is happening while it's happening so that they can more readily anticipate their own moves, or more importantly, you can kind of help direct them as well. I think at the highest level, it's important as a give and take for everybody on the team to really have some feedback amidst all of the chaos. If you're calling a defensive cooldown and then your teammate says, no, I don't need to, and they've assessed that they don't, that comes at the highest level of play. But if you're just starting out Arena, it's usually better to just go in with one person who is in charge of calling the cooldowns. If a mistake happens, a mistake happens. You know next time not to repeat it, but it's better to make sure that things are organized so you're not using all of your cooldowns at the same time. This is the number one thing preventing you from climbing rating at the moment, is just not being aware of when enemies are activating cooldowns and then not properly activating your own cooldowns to exchange for them. So in this video, I'm going to be just talking you through that and what you need to be looking for in a match. Right now, hunters are very popular, especially this hunter feral druid priest combination. You're going to see it quite a lot, so it's important to know how their classes work. The main thing that you want to be focused on is your raid frames here. When crowd control has been engaged on the left side, a box will appear. That means that this player cannot help assist or deal damage. During that time, that's when this team will continue to chain crowd control, so you'll want to use cooldowns and you'll want to call them out ahead of time. So right at the start, I want to be next to my team, as this team is in stealth, and they're going to initiate with stuns. We can see 2 stuns. We're trying to figure out who is the enemy attacking at this moment in time, and it looks like the feral druid is going after the warrior. So the warrior is the target. They've engaged crowd control on 2 of us. We can't assist the warrior. It's at this time that things get very scary, so use the warrior's personal defensive cooldown. It is a good rule of thumb to just use the person who's being attacked's defensive cooldowns first, as me as the healer or my shaman will be able to assist multiple players. The warrior's only really going to be able to help themselves out with die by the sword. So we survived that freezing trap with die by the sword. It's now our turn to start getting aggressive. So I want to use crowd control on the feral druid. I'll then psychic scream the feral druid. My goal after the psychic scream is to cast mind games and try and prevent them from healing with it. The other team knows this and they've used their interrupt to stop me from utilizing that crowd control. Our target was the priest at that moment in time. However, we've realized going after the priest all the way in the back there is going to be a bad idea. So let's hit somebody that's out in the line of sight. But once again, stun lock, stun lock. I'm going to activate pain suppression. And the reason that I use my cooldown in this position is because I can use it while I'm stunned. So in this, my shaman is not able to do anything. They're crowd controlled. I know that I'm going to get freezing trapped out of a stun. So I'll use pain suppression beforehand. I see Cyclone being casted. So I tell my teammates, hey, Cyclone. They're able to wind shear it. They're able to stop it and break my crowd control. Now that we've survived their crowd control, we're going to start getting aggressive. This is where we'll use our storm bolt. And this is where I want to try and crowd control the feral druid again. So we've stunned the feral druid, and I want to use mind games on the feral druid to prevent the feral druid from healing. Against this composition, the feral druid will actually do more healing than the priest, which is why I've allocated my mind games to the feral. It is also easier for me to fear and mind games the feral than it is the priest in this position. So our main goal is to just truck the hunter down through the priest healing and either run the priest out of mana or just burst them out of nowhere with a wind shear while removing the feral from the game. Here we can see that we're stunned. My warrior is still the target, and we're getting ready. And I'm going to call for War Banner. Right as the trap ends, War Banner is dropped. This reduces incoming crowd control, so the Psychic Scream is now reduced in duration. However, the enemy team saves their freezing trap, so I have to pay attention to the hunter's positioning and look at him try and launch the freezing trap. He uses Concussive Shot. That's a giveaway that he wants to throw it, and as he throws it, I use Shadow or Death. This then redirects damage back to me and breaks me out of the freezing trap. So because we've effectively denied their crowd control, we don't need to use cooldowns. Now we can start getting aggressive again. Look to utilize Stormbolt on the hunter and try to really take down the hunter. I'm still waiting for my psychic scream in my mind games. This is like my main focus is crowd control. You could think of this as Hammer of Justice on a paladin, or Cyclone on a druid, something like that. If you're healing on a different class, we want to pump as much damage out onto the hunter during the stun. We want to fear the feral druid. We also want to fear the hunter pets when we can, to stop damage and also to prevent the 10% damage reduction that the hunter pets give to the hunter by standing near them, which is another reason why using psychic scream in melee range on the feral druid and the pets is such a good idea against this specific composition. And as a result, we get aspect of the turtle. So you can see the other team is trading their cooldowns effectively during ours, and that's why this match is going on for some time. If you're playing at the lower ratings, you may have already used all of your defensive cooldowns and at this point had nothing. So the main objective is to just not overlap as much as possible. Here we see stun lock on shaman, stun lock on warrior. This could be scary. However, the hunter has not thrown their freezing trap yet. I anticipated it, so I tried to Shadow Word Death earlier, but they held on to it. And I'm just standing on top of my team to make it annoying for the hunter to land the freezing trap. But here we're both in Psychic Scream. We're assessing the damage. The enemy team has no offensive cooldowns. Note that there's no red icon, no yellow icon. There is now red or yellow or glowing icons here to mean that they're dealing more damage. Because they didn't activate cooldowns, even though I was crowd controlled, my warrior didn't really take too much damage. So then as soon as we come out of crowd control, we can just stabilize and top them off. It's a good idea to notice if the enemy is trying to bait you into using something that you don't need to use. So you need to assess crowd control on your team. Enemy cooldowns, no enemy cooldowns, crowd control, is it really as dangerous? Really assess it a little bit more closely. If they do activate cooldowns, use a cooldown. Make sure that you're calling which one it is so you have an overlap, because look at how many more options we have now to keep this game going, to try and then eventually run this priest out of mana. And now at this position, we've avoided their crowd control and we're getting aggressive onto their hunter. So I'm using penance onto the hunter and I'm trying to help out as much as possible. Here is stun onto me, stun onto shaman. This is where my shaman uses their medallion and the grounding totem, which actually negates the freezing trap and denies it. So we've used a shaman cooldown to prevent us from using it. Usually in this position, I said use die by the sword. However, because the enemy hadn't activated berserk, it's not a very good trade. So the shaman using their trinket and using their grounding totem to stop crowd control is a little bit more efficient. That way my warrior can rely on die by the sword during that deadly berserk cooldown, which is going to be coming up in about 30 seconds from now. Dampening also plays into a factor a little bit later, but let's not worry about that because I'm sure a lot of your games probably aren't even going on this long if you're having trouble climbing rating. Here I tried to Psychic Scream the Feral and actually missed. It's quite a big deal. You'll see that the Feral Druid is just using regrowth and regrowth and regrowth and regrowth and healing the Hunter for quite a lot. So if I had landed that, this may have been a point in the game where we could have even just won, but I still want to utilize the mind games on the Feral Druid as much as possible. And here I see that my warrior is stunned, so I'm looking at the Hunter. I'm trying to pay attention. Is the Hunter going to be looking for a freezing trap? It's just come off cooldown. I'm standing next to the Hunter, and they actually did go for it, but I was a little bit too close. Not close enough that I could stand on a partner and not far enough away that I could anticipate death. However, my Shaman is not crowd controlled. So while my Shaman is not crowd controlled, they can heal. My Warrior is not crowd controlled. They can use Intimidating Shout. I don't need to use a medallion. We don't really need to use any powerful defensive cooldowns when there are two players on your team that aren't crowd controlled and using their defensive utility. Now we've survived their attack. It's time to get back onto the Hunter. It's time to get focused about crowd controlling the Feral. So I'm on top of the Feral, and I'm going to try and use my Psychic Scream. I want to stack it up with the pets, but it's a little bit too far away. And even though it's on diminishing return, I need to line it up with Storm Bolt. You want to make sure that that crowd control is coordinated, even if it is only for 2 seconds, because you can see we did a tremendous amount of damage. The Hunter barely survives at 10%. Now my Shaman is in a Cyclone, can't help me heal. My Warrior is incredibly low health, so I drop my Barrier. This is where panic happens. I'm just going to pause the clip here. This is actually where a moment of panic happens, because this damage seemingly came out of nowhere, right? There wasn't any crowd control on me. My Shaman was crowd controlled, but there was suddenly a huge amount of damage that forced us to use Barrier and panicked and use Die by the Sword. This is a mistake that can lose you a game. That's why I wanted to pause this right here. This is something that you don't want to do, but we were far enough ahead on cooldowns that we still had Pain Suppression coming up in 10 to trade, but in this position, Barrier by itself was likely enough. So just note that this is something that you're likely doing if you go and watch your games back that is costing you games. Now while we continue watching it, we should be able to recover quite easily in the barrier. So I'm using Penance and Solace aggressively, healing through Atonement as a Disciplined Priest to restabilize. I note that the Hunter has activated Bestial Wrath, this red icon, so his damage is going to be increased. I'm paying attention to where the Hunter is standing. Is he trying to go for any crowd control on me? Here we can see the Feral now popping Berserk, and because of that mistake earlier, it's going to definitely cost a pain suppression. Once again, in a situation where Shaman is stunned, I'm stunned. I'm going to activate pain suppression before the freezing trap is landed. Because we're so far ahead here, I actually decided to use my medallion aggressively. This is not something that I really recommend. It can completely backfire. It could lose me the game doing this, but I felt the Hunter with no trinket, the Feral with no trinket, it was a good idea for me to get out of crowd control and start crowd controlling the Feral. So now you can see mind games on the Feral, and the Feral is trying to heal the Hunter like he was earlier to save him, but with mind games on him, he's actually killing his Hunter, which actually resulted in us being able to find victory. So against these hybrid DPS, you really want to take them out of the game. This way the enemy healer will spend more mana because the hybrid isn't able to assist them. And if you're not crowd controlling the hybrid, you will not be able to end the game. This is something also that's just aside from cooldowns. This is a little bit more just aggressive play and what you need to be doing to win. If there's Feral Druids, if there's Ret Paladins, Enhancement Shamans, you need crowd control on them to be able to execute a kill or to more effectively run the enemy healer out of mana. That's an important part of the strategy. But regardless, I hope that this video was helpful to you and you take it away for your own gameplay and your own improvement so your rating starts to go up. And let me know what you think. If this video helps you out in the future, then comment down below, leave the video with a like. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next one.